Prague off the beaten track. Pohanka takes you away from the crowds to the city's hidden gems.
Hello and welcome to Prague off the beaten track. Today I'm heading to the northern edge of the city, to Bohnice, part of Prague 8. It's one of those places most people associate with a sprawling panel housing estate from the 1970s, a typical example of what used to be called socialist modern living. But Bohnice is actually much older and more varied than it may seem from the bus window. The original village, Staré Bohnice, actually dates back to the 12th century and still has a charming small town feel in some corners, with the church, a few historic farmhouses, a few narrow lanes that remind you that this part of Prague was once a genuine countryside. Now, of course, when you say Bohnice, and not only in Prague, I suspect, most people immediately think of the psychiatric hospital that has stood here for more than a century. But that's only one part of this large and, I think, quite diverse district. Most of Bohnice today is made up of the housing estate that I mentioned. Yet even here, if you walk a little away from the main streets, you suddenly find quiet corners, traces of the old village, and two quite dramatic viewpoints over the river that make this area so fascinating. So I'm walking toward the very edge of Bohnice, and before I reach the viewpoints, I decide to stop at a place that most visitors to Prague have probably never heard of, the Bohnice Cemetery. It lies in a small wooded area not far from the hospital grounds, and although it was once used for burials connected to the psychiatric institution, it hasn't been active now for decades. So today the site is administered by the Prague 8 Municipal Authority, which keeps it open to the public. Almost all of the graves that I can see around are now covered with ivy, and only a few tombstones still rise from the carpet of leaves, normally probably green, but now kind of golden brown. On a calm autumn day like this, the cemetery feels peaceful rather than sad, I would say. Sunlight kind of filters gently through the trees. The air smells of damp earth and fallen leaves, and the only sounds are occasional, maybe birds, and the soft crunch of footsteps on the path. I don't know if you can hear it. It's easy to forget that you are still technically in the city. The place has a quiet dignity, I think, not eerie or unsettling, just serene, as if time itself had slowed down here. And walking among the ivy-covered graves, I stop for a moment at one corner of the cemetery, connected with a particularly sad story. Because during the First World War, patients from a psychiatric hospital in the Italian town of Pergine Valsugana were brought here after their institution had to be hastily evacuated in the spring of 1916. More than 100 were transferred to Bohnice, but by the end of the war only 46 returned home. The rest, 48 Italian men and women, remained here forever, buried in this quiet ground far from their native land. I actually came across this story, I should probably explain, on a special website called Bohnický hřbitov or Bohnice Cemetery, which is available both in Czech and English. And if you want to learn more, you shouldn't find it too difficult to find it. And I might actually include a link on the web page of Prague of the Beaten Track. Italy didn't forget these people. In 1932, a memorial plaque was installed here at the Bohnice Cemetery, and it was financed, I read, personally by, believe it or not, by Benito Mussolini, and unveiled by the then Italian ambassador to Prague, a Guido Rocco. Newspapers in both countries reported on the ceremony, which drew crowds of patients and locals in a solemn procession through the hospital grounds. as I can read on the website. The plaque itself has long disappeared, but a small metal box on the chapel wall still marks the spot where earth from Prague was once placed. It's a modest reminder of a long-forgotten episode of the Great War and the human lives quietly intertwined between Italy and Prague. So I'm leaving the stillness of this hidden corner of Bohnice behind, and I'm heading towards the viewpoints. After leaving the cemetery, I follow a non-paved road that winds around its outer wall. It's only a few minutes' walk to the first lookout, though you have to take a short detour through the trees and stretch of uneven ground. And the sounds of the city kind of fade in the distance, and they are, believe it or not, I don't know if you can hear it, replaced by the rustling of leaves and the low hum of the wind in the branches. And then, quite suddenly, the path opens onto a small clearing, edged with low shrubs and tall grass swaying in the breeze. From here, the view stretches across a deep wooded valley, a quiet fold in the landscape where a narrow road winds down from Bohnice toward Troja, I believe, towards the Vltava river, and somewhere beyond. The river itself, by the way, isn't visible from this viewpoint, but the scene has its own quiet beauty. Layers of trees rise and fall with the slope, their colors kind of shifting in the autumn light, and above them the blue sky feels both wide and close at the same time. It's the kind of place where you can stand still for a while and simply listen to the wind, to the distant murmur of traffic, and to the silence that settles between them. So I take one last look across the valley and set out for the second lookout. It's not exactly around the corner, about 1.5 kilometers or roughly a mile away. And to get there, I have to descend into the valley first and then climb uphill again on the other side. But I'm told that the walk is worth it. The path winds through the quiet woodland, and with every step the air feels fresher and the light softer. Now I've reached the second lookout. The climb already feels worth it, I have to say. The trees begin to thin out and I step into a wide open green field that stretches some distance towards the edge of the very steep slope that goes down to the river. To describe it, just behind me, actually half hidden among the trees, are a few of the panel blocks of flats or paneláky that mark the edge of Bohnice. I suppose this is the kind of place where parents bring their children to play, especially on weekends. But today is a weekday and I've got it almost to myself, apart from a couple of people walking their dogs and enjoying the quiet. And from here, the view suddenly opens very, very wide. This time all the way to the Vltava river below. It winds through the valley towards the north, towards its meeting with the Elbe or Labe river. And right now it's kind of catching the light like a strip of silver, some places gold, depending on which direction you look, with wooded hills and meadows far away rising above the valley. And if I look south, or maybe a bit southeast, I can just make out far in the distance the unmistakable silhouette of Prague Castle. It's really on the horizon, and in front of it lies the valley of Davice, soft and right now quite hazy in the afternoon lights, and I suspect smog as well. You can definitely see the city from here, in other words, though you would probably need binoculars to really appreciate the details. Unfortunately, I didn't bring mine. I should remember to do so next time I come here. But even so, it's a really wonderful view. So, That was my walk through Bohnice, from the quiet, ivy-covered cemetery to these two outlooks that show a completely different side of Prague. It's not all that far from the city centre, even though it's on the edge of the city. You don't need a car or train to get here, just take public transport and walk a little. It feels kind of distant and peaceful. I think it's a reminder that even in a big city like Prague, you can still find quiet corners full of stories that are just waiting to be discovered, like the one about the Italians who came to be buried here. Well, that's it for today. As always, you can find photographs, a map and a fact box for this episode and for this talk about Bohnice on the Prague Off the Beaten Track page at the Radio Prague International website.
Prague Off the Beaten Track. Vít Bohánka takes you away from the crowds to the city's hidden gems.